It's as if every public interest group has woken up to the fact that Todd Blanche's confirmation hearing is on July 15th. And now's the time to go after him and go after him hard. Don't want to be a day late and a dollar short. Want to make sure you've got all of
the brave and the dreams we bring. 250 years and our hearts still say we love this nation more with every passing day. For the workers, the warriors, the families who believe in the promise of America, the strength we never leave. From sea to shining sea, forever we'll proclaim. God bless us all, bless the USA.
Freedom of Information Act request out there. Tie Donald Trump to the Epstein scandal and to Judge Cannon. And now we've got the latest one. Yes, a bar complaint brought by not one, not two, but 101 judges. 101, I almost said Dalmatians. 101 judges have brought a bar complaint against Todd Blanche just in time for his confirmation hearing in about 3 weeks. And it's brought to you by, a number of groups that we follow and we like a lot. One in particular, Lawyers Defending American Democracy. We've had him on the show before, including Scott Harshbarger, the
Raise your hands to the sky.
Term Attorney General of the state of Massachusetts.
I guess raise your hands.
And wait till you read, I think every judge
brave and the dreams we bring. 250
got a page. They filed a 69-page single-spaced complaint. With the regulator for people who practiced in Manhattan, like me, the Appellate Division, 1st Judicial Department at 180 Maiden Lane. I was sworn in at the 1st Judicial Department back in 1992 in the ceremonial courthouse on Madison Avenue in Midtown Gramercy, I would say. And wait till you hear what the 101 judges have to say for themselves, breaking it down so methodically that I think all that somebody like Senator Whitehouse's staff needs to do is get a hold of it and follow it closely, and you'll have what you need to cross-examine Todd Blanche. Let's cover it here. To kick off Legal AF on Michael Popak, take a minute, right? Hit that free subscribe button. So the grievance committee members get the ethics complaint. It's broken down as follows. It's broken down as to all the bad things that he did. It would be the violations of the New York Rules of Professional Responsibility in the creation of the Anti-Weaponization Fund, his conflicts of interest, his dishonest and deceitful comment, his abuse of the Justice Department to target personal and political opponents of the president, like James Comey and Kilmer Armando Abrego Garcia, the Epstein Files Transparency Act violations, and his doing things that are adversely reflect on his fitness as a lawyer. See, all lawyers are bound by their state rules of professional responsibility. It's our code of ethics, our code of conduct. We learn about it in law school. We swear an oath to uphold it, along with the Constitution of the state and of the federal government, whenever we get sworn in, that's what it's called, to be a member of the bar. That is a profession that I take seriously. As soon as you're sworn in, you are an officer of the court. Whether you practice transactional law, environmental law, corporate law, or you're a litigator trial lawyer like me, you're an officer of the court, as long as you're a member of the bar. And you can't be a lawyer and provide legal advice and get paid for it or otherwise unless you're a member of the bar. And every state has a regulator about their members of the bar. In some states, there's a unified bar, like the Florida Bar, an entity that sits in Tallahassee and regulates Florida lawyers. And in other states, they let the appellate court and the lower level appellate courts handle admission and supervision, and then sort of everything in between. So technically, there's no New York bar. I'm a member of the New York bar, but technically, I'm a member of the First Appellate Division of the appellate court, and that's who regulates my ability, my privilege to be a lawyer. Todd Blanche too. He and I are sort of peers. I think we're about 5 years apart in practice. So let me give you the summary of the complaint. We'll post this up on Legal AF Substack for you to review. This is starts on page 3 of 69 pages by 101 judges. Let me comment on the 101 judges for a moment, shall I? Shall we? This is a different set of judges than the more than 200 state and federal judges that Judge Ludick has helped put together, that often appear in cases that I cover, like the 35 former federal judges, that's a mouthful, in Miami, who implored Judge Williams to reopen the IRS Trump case and find fraud on the court against Donald Trump and Todd Blanche of the Department of Justice and the Treasury Department. Or the 74 federal and state judges, 174 federal and state judges that just filed a friend of the court brief to implore the Federal District Court of Appeals in D.C. to reopen the matter of whether the Trump administration, and Todd Blanche again, should be found in criminal contempt of court. This is another 101 judges, mainly state court judges, including in New York, bound together to file this. And there's a power to it. Judge Ludick, who's going to be with me later today for an interview, he said it is the judges, the state court judges, the federal court judges. They are the only judges who can protect this democracy and rise above the partisan din. In fact, here's a clip.
Never before in American history has a group of judges, retired or otherwise, ever come together, much less to speak publicly against what they are witnessing in the United States of America with respect to the corruption of the Constitution and the rule of law in this country. I could not be any prouder of this group of judges. 200 or 300 former federal and state judges have come together over the past year and a half, enthusiastic and willing to be heard collectively as that group on many of the issues that are facing America today. Extraordinarily unprecedented. And this is why they have done it. There is not a question in the world that the only voices that can be heard today above the din of the political, partisanship are judges, sitting active judges, and even retired judges. They are the only people in this country, Michael, who can save America today. And these judges, both active and retired, are prepared to honor their oaths in trying to save America.
Well, that sound you hear is a collective sigh of relief from our audience. Now, let me read to you from the complaint. It says, like all federal officers, before assuming his duties, Mr. Blanche was required to take an oath of office. It required him to bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution. The oath was backed by the executive order and the standards of ethical conduct for the administration. Blanche, as an attorney, is representative of the United States, the Department of Justice. On May 18, 2026, a little over a month after assuming the position of acting attorney general, he announced the Department of Justice had entered into an unprecedented settlement agreement with Donald Trump, his sons, and the Trump Organization. The agreement purported to resolve claims the president and his family made against the IRS. And also, gave a release of all potential claims that could have been made against Donald Trump, his family, his organizations, or related or affiliated individuals of the United States. This extraordinary sight unseen global release of liability violates longstanding norms in the Justice Manual and serves as a backdoor blanket pardon for Trump. It continues. In addition to apparent violations of professional conduct by Mr. Blanche, it says on page 4, a brief discussion of Mr. Blanche's apparent abuse of the department's authorities to target President Trump's personal and political enemies is found in Part B of this complaint, including Kilmer Abrego Garcia, where the court found vindictive prosecution warranted the dismissal of that indictment, and remarkable statements that Mr. Blanche made, and that Mr. Blanche has overseen the indictment of former FBI Director James Comey for sharing an Instagram post of seashells arranged to form 8647. They quote Robert Jackson, famous Attorney General and later Supreme Court Justice of the United States, about the role of a prosecutor in America on page 5. If the prosecutor is obliged to choose his cases, it follows that he can choose his defendants. Therein is the most dangerous power of the prosecutor, that he will pick people that he thinks he should get, rather than pick cases that need to be prosecuted. In such a case, it is not a question of discovering the commission of a crime and then looking for the man who's committed it. It's a question of picking the man and then searching the law books or putting investigators to work to pin some offense on him. They then talk about Jeffrey Epstein and the violation of the Epstein Transparency Act. They say that as a result, the department over-redacted documents without legal authority, failed to provide legal required justifications for redactions, and released the victims' names of nearly 100 survivors in the single most egregious violation of victim privacy in one day in U.S. history. And this also refers to the article, I believe, written by the New York Times about the Epstein scandal. Now, when they get to the background, it's very interesting. Blanche had to respond to written questionnaire in order to be the Attorney General or the nominee. And here's what he has to say as reflected on pages 9 and 10 of the filing. This is in a questionnaire. How do you foresee this relationship affecting your work and decision-making if confirmed as Deputy Attorney General? This is when he was Deputy Attorney General. In other words, how do you see the fact that you were the former private criminal defense lawyer? How do you think that'll affect your day-to-day operation as Deputy Attorney General? Response: I respect President Trump and consider my representation of him to be the highlight of my professional life and an honor that I will cherish until the day I die. My relationship with President Trump will positively affect my work and decision-making because I strongly believe I share his views of how to restore the integrity of the Department of Justice and enforce the rule of law. Will you commit to consulting with career officials regarding matters where you previously represented an adverse party, including Mr. Trump? In the event of any potential conflict, I will consult with the appropriate ethics officials. Do you commit to recusing yourself on matters where you represented Trump? Please see my response to the prior question. Do you commit yourself to recuse yourself on matters involving President Trump? See my prior answer. If President Trump pressures you to engage in unethical or illegal conduct, would you tell him no? As I stated, I respectfully reject that premise. If confirmed, I will always uphold my oath to support and defend the Constitution. Notice how he weasels out of saying, I would not abide by illegal conduct requests. Is President Trump above the law? I'm not aware of what it means to be above the law, so I cannot answer the question. If confirmed, will you recuse yourself from any actions related to the investigation of the Jan 6 case? I will consult with appropriate Department of Justice ethics. How about the Mar-a-Lago case? See my response above. Will you recuse yourself from any actions related to the falsifying business records case? Please see my answer above. Will you recuse yourself from any review or investigations resulting or involving President Trump, his family, or business activities? See my response above. I mean, do you see why they believe that at least 4 or 5 different rules of professional responsibility and conduct have been violated by Todd Blanche in the Epstein matter, the targeting of the president's enemies matter. I mean, look, that's what he said when he was trying to get the job of Deputy Attorney General. Here's what he said recently when he was still campaigning for the job about being in love with Donald Trump. Play the clip.
I love working for President Trump. It's the greatest honor of a lifetime. And if President Trump chooses to keep me as acting, that's an honor. If he chooses to nominate me, that's an honor. If he chooses to nominate somebody else and I go back to being the DAG, that's an honor. If he chooses to nominate somebody else and asks me to go do something else, I will say, thank you very much. I love you, sir. So I don't have any goals or aspirations beyond that.
So this should lead to the opening of a Barr complaint and investigation by the First Department. Some states like Florida have said, well, if they're in the federal government, we're not going to do our job and take away their law license. Why not? Why aren't you? New York is not quite that way. They've been willing to do it. So let's see what they do next. I've invited onto the scene the groups here that have sent in this ethics complaint to appear with us on Legal AF. And as soon as I get them on here, you'll be the first to know. We'll follow it. These are all of the facts that are going to be pulled together and marshaled and arrayed against Todd Blanche during his confirmation hearing, which will be presented live as a live stream on July 15th here on Legal AF YouTube. Until my next report, you know what to do. Hit the free subscribe button. Help us to continue to grow our pro-democracy channel. Until my next report, this is Michael. Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.
Amid a drip, drip, drip of revelation after revelation after revelation that Justice Clarence Thomas repeatedly failed to disclose lavish financial gifts from billionaire and right-wing activist Harlan Crow, the Senate Judiciary Committee is pushing Crow for a full accounting of the extent of his financial relationship with Thomas. In a letter sent last night, and according to the Washington Post, the senators are, quote, asking Crow and 3 companies associated with him to provide an itemized list of gifts worth more than $415 that he has made to Justice Thomas, any other justice, or any justice's family member, as well as a full list of lodging, transportation, real estate transactions, and admission to any private clubs Crow may have provided. The letter emphasizes this information will help identify specific shortcomings in the Statement on Ethics, Principles, and Practices, as well as current law that legislation needs to address. Crow has given hints, however, that he may be as unwilling to disclose his financial particulars as Justice Thomas has been. NBC News is reporting this, quote, Senate Finance Committee Chairman Ron Wyden last month asked Crow to provide a full account of undisclosed trips, gifts, and payments he has made to Clarence Thomas over the years. An aide to Wyden saying the chairman, quote, received an obstructive letter from an attorney representing Crow late Monday night, which refused to provide answers to Wyden's request. And in more ominous news for Thomas, Bloomberg News is reporting that Senator Sheldon Whitehouse is pressing the U.S. court system for information about how its governance body responded to Clarence Thomas's failure to disclose his wife's income in 2011. A committee of judges concluded that Thomas's lapses in reporting Ginny Thomas's income was not willful misconduct, but details about that review and the panel's reasoning were not shared with the public. Joining us now, the aforementioned Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, Democrat of Rhode Island. He's a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Senator, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
we've been covering your efforts to reform isn't a strong enough word, it doesn't seem anymore, but try to shine a bright light on the misdeeds and questions of real failures to disclose. But I wonder if you can first address whether Senator Feinstein's return to the committee allows you to start issuing subpoenas and taking a more forceful posture when it comes to attempts at oversight and investigation.
It restores our majority, which means that if we can get unanimity among Democrats on the committee, we're able to move judges who the Republicans are not willing to support and also pursue investigative efforts.
When it comes to the court, is the priority investigating the conduct that's been now reported by multiple news organizations, or is the priority a new code of ethics to stop? I mean, just take me through what your priorities are for the court.
Sure. Well, first of all, it's to understand exactly what took place with respect to all of the donations that have been filtered through to the Thomas household, not just from Harlan Crow, but also from Leonard Leo, who is the sort of fixer in the billionaire effort to capture the Supreme Court. So that's a very significant issue. Then we need to understand the judicial process for considering these concerns, because the last time this happened on very similar facts, Harlan Crow, yacht travel, jet travel for Thomas, it went down into the Financial Disclosure Committee of the Judicial Conference, and no public report ever emerged and no referral to the Attorney General ever emerged. So because we're on that track again with these new revelations, we also need to look back and see what took place in the last set of revelations. And finally, this is not the Clarence Thomas ethics scandal. This is the Clarence Thomas ethics scandal appendage to a much larger inquiry that needs to be made into a very robust, billionaire-funded, very secretive effort to capture and control the Supreme Court. And so there's lots of investigative work that we need to pursue towards the goal, which your last segment expressed so wonderfully. Thank God for honest courtrooms, but we need honest courtrooms.
Well, and I know this is something you've been working toward and talking about for years. The country seems to have caught up with you. Confidence in this court has plunged farther and faster than any institution in public and civic life. Would you like to see John Roberts? I mean, I know the answer would be yes as a partner, but I guess a better way to ask the question is, can you do anything meaningful to change the lack of transparency, the lack of ethics, and the appearance of impropriety on the court without some buy-in from John Roberts?
I believe there are several pathways, but I believe one very credible pathway is the one that we deployed when we were persisting at investigating Justice Scalia's plan to receive free hospitality when it came via personal invitation, even if he had no personal relationship with the donor. And when we persisted in pressing that question to the Judicial Conference of other judges, the other judges slapped that behavior down very forcefully, clarifying that what had been done was actually not lawful and should not be done any further. And Clarence Thomas said, "Oh, okay, I'll adjust my conduct accordingly." So there's a track of the Judicial Conference applying itself to these ethics problems and sending signals to the Supreme Court that they need to clean up their act. So that would be very important. That's why I sent this recent updated letter to the Judicial Conference to focus them on those issues.
I want to ask if we understand this correctly. We've, in sort of understanding the revelations, and again, without your majority on the committee, we haven't seen, most of this is coming from journalists and journalism, but there's a fundamental lack of transparency in the dark money that you've been talking about for many, many years, which seems to flow back and forth between the special interests and the conservative justices. There's a lack of ethics for the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court only. They do not abide by the same ethics rules that govern federal judges. And then there seems to be this third bucket of a lack to abide by their own meager disclosure and ethics laws. Is it that third category where you have questions of potential illegality?
That third is probably the center of the concentric circles of investigation that are required, because that's very immediately in front of us. And I think that the measure that the court says it's following is the same code of ethics and the same disclosure statutes that all the judges have to follow. And when they don't, I think that puts the other judges very on edge. The fundamental problem here is that the Supreme Court gets to call its own fouls. And they've gotten very sloppy about never calling any foul on themselves or on each other. And they're now operating way out of bounds with where other federal judges know they have to behave.
As a distraught Warriors fan, I think that's a very apt way of describing it. Let me ask you this about this third category. Will the Judiciary Committee, with Senator Feinstein back, begin discussions about subpoenas for people like Mr. Crow or Justices Thomas or Roberts themselves immediately?
Well, we are going to continue the investigative work, both on the Judiciary Committee and in the Finance Committee, where Chairman Wyden has a very important role, even though he was rebuffed by Harlan Crow's lawyer. There is more to be done in both cases, and I think we as people concerned about this court need to do a very fair but also very thorough job of bringing the facts forward before the American people. And I think both committees are going to be working to get the information necessary for us to take the action and perform the oversight we need to do.
I feel like if the court were interested in understanding why the public's trust in it had plunged, as I said, so far and so fast, and they called you, you could tell them exactly when, why, and how. But if I asked you to sort of to pull back and give a wider picture, I mean, it seems that the court relishes issuing opinions that it loves to underscore, fly in the face of 85, 75, super majorities of the American people, as they did in the majority opinion and the concurring opinions of Dobbs. And they seem disdainful, scornful, and angry at any journalism that seems to point to their own lack of ethics and disdain for their own ethics code. Is there anything else that I'm missing? Is there any other part of that?
No, I think that's really the issue here. And if you want to put a very fine, clear example of this forward, it would be Justice Thomas ruling in the case regarding the January 6th Commission's investigative powers, which led to his own wife's emails. The question of whether that was lawful or not depends on a fact. A simple fact. What did he know about his wife's insurrection activities, and when did he know it? And if there's one thing that tells you how off kilter the Supreme Court has become, it is that he has never been officially asked that question.
Your work has always been so important on this front, and now it's everybody's focus. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us about it, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much.